Good morning. We are live on Facebook. My name is Robin Swanheiser. I'm the program director at the Biennial of the Americas, and we are here for our coffee chat, which we have been hosting every Friday at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And this morning we have four amazing panelists joining us who will be talking about compassionate action and empathy. If at any point throughout this conversation you have questions, please feel free to comment below the video and we will get some of those questions at the end of the conversation. We are joined by three panelists and our moderator today. We have Leila Salazar Lopez from Amazon Watch, who is joining us from San Francisco. We have Michael Ventura from Sabrosa, who's joining us from New York. And Yolanda Chase here in Denver, Colorado, who is an executive consultant in diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And finally, our moderator, Carrie Scott from Liberty Latin America, who is joining us from Panama City in Panama. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie, who will be moderating this discussion. And we hope you all enjoy our coffee chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Robin. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you and your families are safe and well. While we're physically separated here, I'm so glad you could join us for our virtual coffee session this morning. What I've learned over these past few weeks is just how important it is to actually stop and connect with others, and to listen and to learn from each other's and other people's experiences. So I hope you have your coffee. I have mine. We are ready to get started. We have an incredible panel today who are all joining us from the US, and I'm here in Panama. We have a ton of questions, but first I thought I'd start with a nice simple question for our panelists. A very simple question, often just a throwaway question, but let me truly ask, how are you? Maybe Leila, you want to take that one first?
Sure. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm here in San Francisco, Ohlone territory, and it's actually a beautiful sunny day today. So that just that makes me happy and smile, because there's been many rainy and cloudy days in the last month, especially on the weekends. But I'm doing good. It's kind of like many of us. I think it's day to day, week to week. There's been days of panic. There's been days of joy. And today's a good day. So I'm grateful, just grateful to be, in a beautiful place and to be healthy and to be with my family. So I'm good to be with all of you.
Thank you, Leila. What about Michael? I know you're joining us from a wet day in New York, but how are you doing?
Yeah, it's been rainy the past couple of days, but I'm doing fine. We in New York are a resilient group of folks, and when something like this happens, and I've been a New Yorker pretty much my whole life, and so I love to see how New York kind of rises to the occasion, and so I'm healthy, my family's healthy, so in that regard, everything is good. It's certainly a complicated time in New York, and our healthcare workers and essential workers are being spread super thin. I went out yesterday for about an hour to just stretch my legs, and it's a ghost town. I mean, by and large, I think I walked past 3 people, which for New York City is pretty, it's pretty odd. But New York is resilient, and we do what we need to do to protect each other, and we'll pull through this from here.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yolanda?
I'm doing great. I think like everyone else, it's an adjustment. I always laugh about the fact that I'm a bit of a homebody anyway. But it's different when you can't go someplace, like I don't have a choice now, but in the past it's like, oh, just stay at home. And it's an interesting and challenging time. I think what's worked best for me has been really just kind of going introspective and really focusing on the things that bring me the most joy. and also continuing to connect with others and sharing insight. And it's a really creative time too. So just leveraging that aspect of it, relationships and feeling the love and self-reflection and peace, I think is what works. But definitely, I think in my area, I live in the suburbs, but when I do, venture out to maybe go down the street to my daughters or whatever, there are a lot of people walking and moving about, some of them, most of them not wearing masks, etc. So I think it raises a little bit of anxiety if you believe in the wear your mask and protect other people, and then you go out and you see people that are just disregarding that. But it's definitely a different time.
Yeah, we are for sure learning as we go. I
Really,
don't know about you guys, but facing so many firsts, seeing things for the first time, doing things for the first time, and a full range of emotion from one day to the next, from 1 hour to the next, and just that kind of general, to your point, that introspection, and just experiencing a lot of those emotions. You started to allude to it a little bit, Yolanda, but what have you learned about yourself these past few weeks? And any tips that you have on things that you've done that have helped, or things that you've come across that actually would be helpful for others?
Yolanda, for
Yeah,
me?
go for it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. What have I learned about myself?
This is a big question.
Oh my goodness. I learned that I have so much more to give.
Yeah.
I think it's a great quote, and I can't remember who the author is or the owner of the quote. I don't know if it was Maya Angelou, but it was talking about in the quietude of solitude, you can hear the voice of God. And I believe that in the quietude of the time that we have while we're in quarantine, really is an opportunity to bring out, that creativity, that insight, and thinking of things in a different way, and allowing yourself to kind of leverage that need for perspective, whether it be your own or someone else's. So that really is what I've learned about myself, is that I have so much more to give, and that in the hustle and bustle of the way life was previously, I really couldn't tap into that as much. I was too busy, satisfying other things and other people, that I just didn't take the opportunity to go, hey, Yolanda, go introspective, live in the moment and really dig deep in what you can offer and give and provide. That is your gift to the world. So that's what I learned about myself. And I think it's pretty compelling.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you for sharing. And Layla, what about you?
Well, I'm with my work, I feel like I'm working more than ever. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. But I have two little girls at home, so practicing a lot of balancing and patience. And I definitely have learned that I need to do yoga. I need to move my body.
Absolutely.
Every day. There's days when I'm sitting in this corner for 8 hours, literally, on the computer, and need to just really, I can't do that every day. I need to move my body. And I love cooking. I'm Chicana Latina. I grew up in a big family where we get together, just like many families, we get together and we show love by cooking. And I feel like my mom a lot these days. Like I love cooking, and I feel like that makes my family happy. And so.
Yeah, very nice. The movement, the kind of exercise and movement, as people are sort of, I don't want to say trapped at home, but I think the sort of mentality of staying home for the good of themselves and for other people. So try to think of it as choosing to stay at home because it's doing something good for myself and for others. Just the point about trying to move around. Of course, not everyone has, always live in areas with a lot of space to be able to do that, but just to stand up from time to time and, walk around, I think makes a big difference. I have a non-negotiable hour in my day where I don't let any meetings go into it, and I take the moment just to move and do something. So it's so important. But Michael, what about you? What have you learned about yourself over this experience?
Yeah, it's been an exercise in really cultivating patience, I would say for sure. There were in months ago, days where there wasn't any daylight in the calendar, and it was just like this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then take a break, and then go see friends at night or whatever it was, and lather, rinse, repeat day over day.
Yeah.
And as the quarantine has come to bear, and we have this opportunity to take a breath, take a beat, and kind of recalibrate, it's been really nice to find, kind of not dissimilar to what we've both kind of just heard, is the balance of sort of some mind time, some body time, and some spirit time over the course of the day. And to really make sure you're checking in with all of those, because it's really easy to just sit here and stare at the machine and talk to people all day long. It's not easy, but it's very easy to fall into that pattern, perhaps. And so for me, making sure that there's time in the morning at the end of the day to take care of my physical body. I love to cook, and actually my wife and I, even though we have tons of friends in the restaurant business, most of them unfortunately right now are all banked up. There are some that are still doing delivery, but what we made a pact to do, we flew home from Australia on March 15th, and we've been in quarantine ever since. And so we said, throughout quarantine, we will only eat food we cook the entire time. We won't, make any deliveries. We won't do any, and it's been a really nice practice for she and I to just cook together every day and to take that time at the end of the day. Probably drinking a little too much wine, but I think it's also okay amidst all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. And I'll keep you on, Michael, for this next question. You can kick this one off. But, here to talk about compassion and empathy, and as human beings, this has always been such an important thing to us. And I truly believe that leaders that lead with compassion, with empathy, will be more effective in creating, positive relationships, positive cultures, positive environments, and have a positive impact on the communities and the citizens in where they live and the world. But what does compassion mean to you in your work, and what can we do to be more empathetic leaders? And Michael, of course, knowing that you wrote the book, The Applied Empathy, I think this is a great question for you to kick off for us.
Yeah, no, it's a topic that comes up a lot, that's for sure. So, for me, empathy, and not just for me, but for all of us, empathy starts with listening, right? When this crisis happened, I got so many notes from people who said, this must be an amazing time for you. You've got so much to say about empathy. Like, you need to run out and, shout it from the mountaintop and let everybody know, how to use empathy right now. And I said, look, this is a unprecedented moment in our history. None of us have ever experienced this. And so 6 weeks ago, I didn't say anything. I said, I'm going to listen for a little while, and I'm going to actually understand how people are feeling and working through all of this, because to just rush out and assume that we have answers because we've done something like this before, nobody's done anything like this before, right? This is brand new for all of us. And so taking that time to really listen and to hear how this is impacting people, how this is impacting families, how this is impacting people who are stuck at home but are caregivers for folks that they can't go see, and what that feels like. And people who are like, I got a call from a friend who shared with me a couple weeks ago that a couple we both know had decided the day before the quarantine to get a divorce. And now they're living in the home together throughout the quarantine. And like, what must that be like, right? And maybe they'll come out the other side better for all of this, or maybe they're, crawling up the walls. But, all of this has been an opportunity to listen and to understand. And so compassion is a side effect of empathy. And without empathy, we can't feel compassion, because we have to understand first in order to bring forth the support and the value that compassion provides to people. We first have to see it from their shoes, right? We have to be able to really take that perspective. So for me, I'm always a big advocate of taking the time to ask the right questions, to practice listening, to really get centered and to understand where that other person is coming from, and to understand yourself. I think a lot of times when we think about empathy, we think about it for someone else, but we can practice empathy with ourselves too. We all have blind spots. We all have stuff we don't focus on or see, or we have these unconscious biases that we might not be sort of aware of. And so to we're with each other, we're with ourselves 24 hours a day. So you have 24 hours a day to practice empathy with yourself. And it's a great place to start, because if you have worked through something on your own, the amount of compassion you will have for someone else who's working through that challenge also is going to be heightened.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. I think one of the things I've learned over the last sort of few weeks is just kind of listening to what's going on for yourself. I think exactly that. And I think it's helping, in the way that we work in our organization in terms of the communications we send and the messaging we send. I think doing so is helping me message things in a completely different way. It's, and the sort of responses I get back from the workforce is very humbling, very inspiring. It definitely is striking a chord with people. So that one strikes a chord with me. I mean, Layla, your unique work you're doing in your world. I mean, how does compassion and empathy really come about in the work that you do?
Well, so for those of you that don't know, I'm the executive director at Amazon Watch, and we work to protect the Amazon rainforest and our climate by working in solidarity with Indigenous peoples who are the forest guardians, the best protectors of the Amazon rainforest, which is very much under threat by the climate crisis and by the COVID-19 crisis. So before all of this, there was already so many threats. And really, when I think of, compassion and, what it really means, I think of Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher. And it really comes down to love. I mean, that's really like what he, embodies and reminds us that that love is compassion in action, and that it is what brings peace. It's what brings joy. It's what brings happiness to other people. And in this time of so much crisis all over the world, but in my work in the Amazon, there's a dear colleague and friend, Quechua leader, Patricia Walinga. We're in daily contact, and the requests for support from women, from families, for meeting basic needs right now are endless. And just the other day, we were texting really late at night, and she said, sometimes I wish I didn't have such a big heart, because this is what keeps me up at night. Like I cannot bear to think that there are people suffering. And that is love. It's just like, you can't just turn it off and say, you know what, I'm done for the night. It's, yes, we have to find that balance, but that comes out of really deep love and for other people and for other beings on this planet. So it's love.
Oh, you're on mute.
Apologies. Thank you for sharing, and we had a small glimpse of your daughter there. I think one of the benefits of working from home is you get to know people at a really different level. Suddenly you see families and you see children. It's okay to have, your son or daughter or dog or cat, sitting on your lap when you do calls. And that's been a really nice kind of moment of deeper connection that we wouldn't have had we not been in this situation. And Yolanda, I guess in your world, in terms of creating inclusive environments, I guess empathy and compassion is such a critical part of that. I mean, what does it mean for you, and how do you bring that to life in your work?
Yeah, I mean, this is truly, my life's work. So for me, I'm so ingrained and embedded in the thought of empathy and compassion and everything I do. So I really, in my product service consulting, the way I move about and engage with my internal customer, client, stakeholder etc., is really founded on the feeling of care, empathy, and compassion. I already am high empathy, a high empath. If you cry, I'm going to cry. I mean, I honestly do feel and absorb the energy that others have around me when it comes to things that they're going through. I feel it and I can relate to that. So in the work that I do, I really try to encourage leaders to pull that from within and lead with the caring aspect of it, lead with, the actions of empathy and compassion, and let it come to life through your voice and how you communicate to the organization. I think, never underestimate the power of the message. I mean, we're seeing that in our political environments and everything. There's power in what you say. And people during pandemics and times of extreme distress and things that are happening are looking for something that will give them hope and feel like you love them. Some of the most profound things that I've experienced and been exposed to during this time of this brush of people who are kind of torn between, their civil liberty and the Constitution, and also doing well for humanity and protecting humanity and others. And, to see people say, and these are, people who are probably leading other people, right? That could be managers in organizations, et cetera. But to say things like, I take care of me, you take care of you, right? I don't have a responsibility for you. And immediately in my mind, I say, that's not, that has never worked in this world, right? It's not something that will ever work, is for us not to care about one another. And oh, by the way, if you have a feeling, whether you're a leader or individually as a person, that you don't owe someone else or care about humanity, then you're forgetting about the fact that somebody cared enough about you to give you a job. Someone cared enough about you to give you a benefits and pay, and money that you can spend. Someone cared enough about you to make sure that you could buy a home. So, the idea of I care, care about myself and not care about others, to me is, is something that individuals are not getting enough or really connecting to this message around why it's so important and why it's essential that care be inserted into everything and that empathy and compassion be as well. So in my line of work, whether it's a competency that I'm building, which I am building one right now in leadership, whether it is through the programming, whether it's through data and analytics that tells the story about why empathy and compassion is working and making your organization more productive and more profitable. It is definitely founded by empathy and compassion and the sense of connectivity and loving and belonging. That's how it plays out in my world.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And I've got a couple of sort of a few questions into some of the sort of areas of, of expertise and some of the things that you guys have been working on. Perhaps a reminder, if anyone's got any questions, of course, feel free to send them through the chat and we will definitely get to all of those. But Mike, I'm going to come back to you for this one. As, employees transition to working from home, what are some of the visible and perhaps the invisible challenges that company are being faced with when faced with supporting their employees in that new environment? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing?
Yeah, there's plenty. I think some of the ones that are most common of late have been, I think everyone's first tendency was, how do we recreate the office remotely? And how do we work the way we always worked some other way? And that is sort of like, in an evolutionary sense, it's sort of like fish with feet. It's like, it's not really one or the other, right? You can't kind of do that. You have to kind of evolve further than just moving the office to online. You have to think about, what are the tools and resources we can use to operate in this new format in a way that is different than the way we used to work. I think for us as an organization, and we're about 40 people. We're not a huge company, but we work with multinationals who have hundreds of thousands of employees, and we're seeing it in both places. The ability to be more asynchronous, to be less, I can't tell you, like a couple months ago, every time we had a meeting, it was an hour long. I haven't had an hour long meeting in probably weeks, because we can get a lot done in 20 minutes because we all have other stuff to do. So people will join in the call, they'll answer what they need to answer, then they can go back to work, then we'll be on Slack, then we'll be on Zoom later to talk about it later. So we found this rhythm and this pattern between all of us that helps us not feel like we're just scheduled into our whole day. Some of the things from an organizational and people standpoint that we see a lot, I think everyone swarmed around initially supporting the most visibly challenged employees, right? So by that, I mean, you can see when someone's sick, right? So first and foremost, every organization was taking care of anyone who had COVID or was symptomatic, right? So, and rightly so. And then the second place everyone really put their resources was on parents, because you can see that the parents are being spread thin. They have to do remote learning. They've got to split time. They've got to cook 3 meals a day. They're juggling a lot, and that's super difficult. And of course, we need to support our parents inside our organizations and make sure they feel like they have the right tools, resources, and time to do their jobs and to do their other jobs with their children as well. But then what we started to see was this workforce that has less visible challenges starting to really struggle in some ways. So I'm talking about folks who live alone, right? And after 5-6 weeks of quarantine, living alone does something to you psychologically. If you're not getting enough interaction with people that isn't just professional, but like if you don't have folks that are commiserating with you or making you laugh at the end of the day or things like that, that's starting to really wear thin. So how are we supporting those individuals who have been isolated for now 6 weeks? And then even folks who maybe have the right systems for that, but are also struggling because they're a caregiver for somebody that they can't reach or go to, right? Someone who's in a nursing home or someone who is their responsibility, but they're not able to care for them in the same way, and the guilt and the challenge associated with that. I also had a conversation, and I'll shut up about this because I could go on for days, but I had a conversation with a client yesterday, and within her division of this organization, she had 250 employees on her team. She is the only one not furloughed. And we talked about how she has survivor's guilt and how like actually it's hard to say that, because she's still getting a paycheck and those other 249 people aren't, but she feels guilty about that, and how and she can't really talk about that in a comfortable way with her team, because she feels like she got the upside of all of this, but at the same time it's still a different type of frustration and challenge that she's grappling with. And how can we help those who are, in her mind, and the way she put it, I've got to work really hard to get 249 people their jobs back, right? And so the pressure on her for that is also significant. So all of these are the dynamics that are just like swirling around right now that organizations need to be mindful of, and to realize that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution to provide support to these folks. They are all going to need different things.
Yeah, that is so true. And even in so much of that resonates in terms of our organization. Particularly, as an expat, of course, as Robin said at the start, living here in Panama City, I'm not from Panama. I'm from the UK, so our home is a long way away. And we had my husband and I making some decisions around when you go into lockdown and the borders are closed. You say, do I stay here? But if something happened at home, do I go home? You're really torn. And I think that, we have a lot of expats in our organization. This is a dilemma that everyone was having to think about, in that moment. But similarly, people that have moved as an expat into a country that they don't know, and they've done that alone. And we have a number of examples of that. So that sort of isolation feel is even bigger when you're also in a foreign place on your own. So I'm very, very, very aware of that, and just that sort of mental health, and well-being that goes with it. The other thing that's come up in our organization, just relating to the workplace, has been people who feel they're not contributing. Everything went to home, your sort of working day changed. There was a group of people that we knew very focused on the crisis and dealing with everything around it. As you said, employee safety, how we serve our customers, all of these things. And then a group of people that were like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And then started to worry about the fact they weren't contributing, and therefore they may get laid off or something like that. So we were dealing with a couple of those dynamics as time has gone on. So spent quite a bit of time reassuring people. So definitely resonates what you're saying for our organization. I mean, Yolanda, I mean, working from home is a privilege, right? Not everyone has had the opportunity or gets that opportunity. We're all sitting here from home in a very fortunate position here. I mean, how do you see those, the people whose jobs are deemed essential and are disproportionately at risk? What is the role of leadership in helping create the environment for people to work effectively from home? And what happens if they can't? How are leaders and companies sort of responding to that?
Yeah, I think that this is one of those areas where it has multiple impacts, right? When you think about those individuals who are disproportionately impacted, that are facing the virus every day by having to go to their jobs that expose them to others in close environments, et cetera. And a vast majority of those individuals are people of color. And organizations that understand the challenge for them, as well as having compassion for how they care and take care of them, are those that organizations that are winning. Those organizations that say we have to make sure that these employees are protected, that we offer them the best essential, not just the essential benefit, but even probably above and beyond benefit, to encourage them, to show them that we care, that we protect them, making sure that they have the equipment that they need, the facial masks, the gloves that they need to be able to at least go to work and have a little less anxiety when they return at home later to be around their families. Just the other day, I had my groceries ordered in, and the gentleman, I was sitting in my office and I was looking out my window, and when he pulled up, I noticed that he didn't have his mask or gloves on. And he came and he, took his time and kind of put things on the stoop as I had instructed him to do. But when he was leaving and he stepped off my porch, I just opened my window and I said, "Hey, blessings, Reflection, how are you?" And he said, "I'm good. I'm just really tired. I've been working really hard." And he was an African-American gentleman. And I said, "Just curious, where's your mask and your gloves?" And he said, "I just didn't get any today and I'm just trying to survive." And it broke my heart, because I was like, he's just trying to survive. He's trying to make a paycheck, feed his family, perhaps. And the fact that he wasn't given a mask and gloves, to him was like, "Hey, that's the trade-off. Like, I'm trying to survive." So the understanding of the impact on the disproportionate, not just from a protection, go to work and worry, but also understanding that this group is also at higher risk for catching and dying from the disease, and that they hold the highest rate for comorbidities and underlying health condition. So it goes far beyond just the idea of let's protect them and give them more benefits so that they'll stay and keep doing this job. It is that it's not, if you don't do that, those basic things, they could die. I mean, they're more at risk for that, and in indigenous communities as well. So this is, I think, incumbent upon, leadership in organizations to say, we will care for this group and we will go above and beyond in the things that we do to ensure that they are safe, protected, and that we are minimizing their worry on a day-to-day basis. And that doesn't mean that we don't think about that for everyone else. It just means that within humanity, and for us to be true humanitarians and really be able to exercise empathy and compassion, we do have to look at those that are less fortunate and who are disproportionately impacted, and say, how can we uplift and bring them into a better light, and more profound protection.
Yeah, so true. And you're right, heartbreaking in that situation. And Layla, I mean, your work is deeply connected to the protection and the preservation of the environment and the people of the Amazon. What are your biggest concerns at the moment, and what gives you hope?
Wow. Well, as I was mentioning earlier, the I have to just acknowledge that, this week is Earth Week, right? We just celebrated the 50-year anniversary of Earth Day. And, for many, many, many months, those of us in the environmental and climate justice movement, Indigenous rights movement, were working towards this week, to really mobilize around the 50-year anniversary of Earth Day to take what was done this September, the biggest climate march action led by the youth ever, right? This last September. And so the youth really called upon all of us to join them again. The Fridays for Future, the Youth versus Apocalypse, the Sunrise Movement, Indigenous youth, really at the forefront of calling on the world to say, we, we're facing a massive, the biggest issue of our time, the climate crisis. We were already like moving, towards that this week. And obviously everything had to change, and everything got taken online. And I really encourage everyone to join Earth Day 2020 live, Earth Day 2020 live. It's been on since Earth Day. It was on all day yesterday, and it's on all day today. Artists, politicians, leaders, and it'll culminate with a dance party tonight. Because I think that's actually what is giving me hope, is to see, this movement is not dying. This movement is thriving. This movement is not going to let, our shelter in place, keep us down. It's actually bringing people together more, where before we were so distracted with so many things. It's like we are focused on what is really going on here. There's a lot of rush to want to go back to normal. And normal was a massive problem, for humanity, for Mother Earth. I mean, it was, we cannot go back to normal. And we whether, you're looking at it from an environmental or a social justice, equality perspective, like it will never be, and we can never let it be the way it was before, because what was before was completely unequal. And, we were at a time that, really, and still, puts, the 1% puts the priorities on, not on, the majority of the people or the planet. And, yes, there are, as I was mentioning before, there are massive threats of deforestation, of fires. People saw, around the world what we've been, facing in the Amazon for decades.
Yeah.
Last summer, people saw the fires in the Amazon. People saw the fires in California. People saw the fires in Australia. And in the climate justice work, we've been saying, the scientists have been saying, the Indigenous people have been warning for decades. Fires, floods, pandemics, these things will happen if we do not get back in balance with Mother Earth. So the signs were there and we're here. So it's not, we're seeing this as all connected, just as we know we're all connected. That is a basic law of ecology, is that we're all connected. And in physical and now in virtual, we are taking that to another level of saying we are all connected virtually, and we have to use that to move forward for a Green New Deal, to move forward more in balance with people on the planet.
Yeah. And anything we can take from the now, to use your term, anything we can take from the now in this experience was to make sure we don't return back to normal. You know, we hear a lot of people saying, when are we getting back to normal? You know, we'll talk a little bit later about what is the new normal and how are we seeing that. But, you know, how do we make sure we learn from this so that we don't return to normal? We have a better version of that.
Well, I mean, you know, I think that, you know, seeing the blue skies, you know, in San Francisco, of, you know, friends who have lived here all their life and have said they've never seen the sky so blue. You know, you could see the Himalayas, you know, from, you know, you could see the Himalayas from India. You could see blue skies. We see coyotes in San Francisco. We see, you know, a resurgence of the wild. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's a sign from Mother Nature, Mother Earth, to say, look, you know, we've been trying to tell you, you know, like, you know, we've been trying to tell you that, you know, you need to reduce your fossil fuel use. Look what's happening with the fossil fuel industry right now. The price of oil is way under $1. And we've been saying, keep fossil fuels in the ground. The scientists, the indigenous people have been saying, you cannot keep drilling oil. You can't keep mining the earth. It is causing our own destruction. And no, we can't do it. It's not economically feasible. Well, it's not economically feasible anymore. And what is our country doing? We're doing everything possible to bail out the industries that have caused the climate crisis instead of bailing out the people. So what we need to do is we need to put people first. We need to put our environment first. Not industries that are dinosaur industries. It's time that we shift and look towards the sun, look towards the solutions. And that's the hope is from the youth who aren't messing around. The hope is from the communities who are most affected, who are saying, no, we actually want local solution. We've been trying to tell you. And this is the time to do that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. A couple more questions from me. We have a few coming in from the audience, so we'll make sure we get to those as well. Yolanda, maybe a question for you. How do you see companies shifting to meet the emotional and social needs of their employees? And what do you see as the role of technology and innovation has been playing over these last few weeks, and how that will continue to play a role in the future?
Oh yeah, that goes without saying, right? I mean, technology is going to shine and you know, more than ever. What I'm finding though, in some of these conversations and research that I'm doing around what are organizations doing right now, what are platforms that are being launched in the new innovation to help support this new normal, if you want to call it that. And it was interesting because I saw a company called First Base, and I'm not trying to give them a plug, but I just saw this company on LinkedIn that was talking about specific resources. And the article was called Companies Who Provide Great Work Experiences Will Beat Every Company Who Doesn't during this pandemic. And I believe that to be true. And the resources that you build, the technology, the leveraging of your intranet hubs within the organization is really key. I mean, pull those forward now. And I think what some organizations are struggling with right now is, oh, we've got this, you know, economic crash right now, everything's going on. We got to think about ways to be productive in the organization and keep people moving and motivated. And then they're kind of putting the inclusion and diversity and belonging and equity aspect away because they feel like, you know, you don't want to bug leaders with trying to think about stuff like that. You've got, you know, they're worried about this. And the reality of that is that organizations who don't take the opportunity to keep that in front of employees and can constantly use and continuously use their technology internally and externally to be able to support employees in that fashion will be left behind. Employees simply need that. It sends a message that they are not forgotten, that the resources and the tools and the connection that they can make with one another still exists. And I believe that organizations that I'm seeing now, there's companies like Tech Systems and places like that who really are saying, we're going to keep our employee resource groups engaged during this time. We're not going to disband them. We're going to ensure that the messaging and the communications that we pull through, whether it be through virtual conversations and events that they hold, or through messaging and communications and publications on their hub, whether it be through their digital learning aspect, whatever, that they're pulling those messages in and they're pushing content out and pulling information in. So also creating open sources of communication for employees with an emphasis on inclusivity and belonging and you know, the feeling of empathy and compassion for one another and how they can continue to connect and bring that forward at their, within their organizations.
Yeah.
Those companies are winning.
Yeah.
It will continue to win because what you build today will be the new norm tomorrow, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And we'll talk about some of the leaders. One of the questions is around leaders. So we'll come to that in a second. But maybe, Michael, before we do, building on Yolanda's points there, from your clients, are you seeing any shift in priorities? You know, since this is hit and as people start to think about the future, any shift in priorities that you're seeing across your client groups?
Yeah, I would say there are two. One is that they've reprioritized their own people.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that they've deprioritized consumers, right? But they have certainly realized that if we're not taking care of what happens inside our four walls, we are not going to be able to take care of anything that happens outside our four walls. So it's been a really beautiful shift because I think HR, L&D, D&I, these things have been continuing to percolate and be, you know, functional parts of organizations for a while, but this is their moment to shine, right? And so if you can actually make those aspects of your business optimized and successful now, you'll build a foundation that will be much stronger for the organization's future. So that's like one big one internally. Externally, I had a call 2 days ago with a luxury goods client, and I was recounting to them how I had gone to the supermarket and I was wearing my mask and I was walking in and someone was walking out and they were wearing their mask and they had just put their sunglasses on to go outside. And I smiled at them and I realized they can't see my smile. Maybe they could like see my eyes squint a little bit, but they don't know I'm smiling. And I couldn't tell if they were smiling back because they had sunglasses on and a mask. And in that moment, I realized how every brand, not just, there's no brand for whom this won't matter. Human interaction is now a luxury good. It's now a premium, right? We took for granted being able to smile at the cashier. We took for granted the subtle cues and the little gestures and the things that happen in our day-to-day lives because that's all we've ever known. But now, literally just the ability to smile, the ability to shake hands with someone, the ability to do those little things are all going to be premium. They're at a premium, right? And we will appreciate them because of that so much more going forward. And so the organizations who think about how to make sure human connection occurs in meaningful and safe and supportive ways for their customers, they're going to be the ones that ultimately endure through this and learn through this in the best possible way, because they're going to actually embrace some of these changes and recognize what we took for granted and what we shouldn't take for granted going forward.
Yeah, so true. And there's a great question here from the audience, which I think links to this sort of section we're talking about here. But the question is, I would love to know if there has been a leader through COVID-19 that any of the speakers think has done exceptionally well in terms of leading with empathy and compassion. Anyone come to mind? Anyone answer?
First one for me that pops up is I think what Bill and Melinda Gates have been doing of late have been really powerful. They have been advocates for science in a time where science seems to be deprioritized by some parts of our country. I also know that they started a accelerator program a couple weeks ago, I believe, in order to start sort of investing in COVID prevention and all this sort of rapid manufacturing and prototyping things. We need our scientists, we need our inventors, we need our creators to be incentivized to work towards the right things. So I've seen him and Melinda emerge as really as thoughtful leaders to help champion some of these issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. What about Layla or Yolanda? Who for you?
I've been really enjoying seeing, Barack and Michelle Obama, as always, really stepping up from a thought leadership perspective, making sure that they are pushing out information that is science-based and allows people to challenge, the falsities that are out there. I honestly believe that they lead with care and have led with care. And empathy and compassion. So I love the thought leadership that they're providing us and that we're benefiting from. And quite frankly, any public figure right now, and I know we're thinking of leaders, but I'm seeing public figures coming out, whether they be in entertainment, whether they be in philanthropy, whatever it is, but really coming out and doing op-eds and talking about things like racism and, discrimination and the things that are happening against Asian people right now. And the impacts on the lower socioeconomic groups, et cetera. So I believe that everyone has a leader in them and a voice, and your voice can be that of power and change. And so anyone who has a voice, that's a public figure, who has a large audience that's speaking to this in a way that's positive and encouraging and leading people in the direction of truth and not false information, and doing it in a kind and loving way. Or anyone who is showing right now mean spirit and being disrespectful to people, I think is the exact opposite of what we need, and it is not great leadership, period.
Yeah, well said. What about you, Layla?
I just recently saw this article about, women heads of state, and it just really makes me think of the Prime Minister, of the leader of New Zealand, and just, she's just such a great example, and that's like, you see what she's saying, you see what she's doing, and you're just like, I wish, only if we had someone like her. And to me, it just really does show like love and compassion, like she, and I think that is in the Indigenous movement, there is a lot of, many times, we're really looking towards women's leadership, and there is this call for, women and the leadership of women. And because, a lot of times we say, why is that? Why is it that so many women are in the environmental movement, in the climate justice movement? And, look at how women are, rising up and stepping up. And why is that? It's because we have so much love and care for our children. Not everyone are mothers, but I could just speak from, as a mother, like, you will do anything for your children, and I think that really shows in women's leadership. Like, we are willing to do whatever it takes because of that deep love that we have for our children and for, our planet and for people. And I'm really seeing just that appreciating women's leadership right now.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I would agree with all of those. What I've seen is just the fact that everyone can be a leader right now. And I think, a couple of examples just, coming very internally to our own organization, but just seeing managers or people early in their career in kind of positions, just really stepping up and taking care of their people, and really seeing that shine through at a level that I hadn't done before. So the key thing for me is remembering that every one of us is a leader. We may not be a public figure or leading a multi-billion company, but in one way or another, whether we're leading our family, whether we're leading with our friends, whether we're leading with colleagues, whatever it is, I think we all can play a role. So that's what I would say. I think we've got one more question here from the audience. So we'll take this amongst us and then we'll wrap up the call here. So second question from the audience here. I would like to know what you think the new normal way of life that we are supposed to be living soon. Will it be more loving and more compassionate? And how can we positively influence so that is so in all areas of our society? Anyone want to take the first pass of that?
You know, I pray that it will.
Mm.
I think that everyone wants to have a better life and live in a better world, a world that is more compassionate and has more empathy and more loving and is more loving. What I think we see in history, and what sometimes happens is that there are big sweeping, kind of innovations and things that come from this, but they come from being able to sustain them in some kind of way. So as people are talking about, oh, I feel like I have more love for humanity, I feel like I'm going to come out of this forever changed. Well, make sure that you are doing things to ensure that it sustains. You talk about efforts that Layla's doing, when you listen to Michael and you hear, what organizations are doing, that those things don't go away, that we continue to build upon them. And whether that's policy or legislation, a change in legislation, whether it is, making sure that you have the right leaders in office, it is about continuing the intention for compassion and empathy and all the various methods and realms that you could possibly do it in. Because all day long I can sit here and tell you something, and then when things go back to normal, I can deviate from that intention. So
Yes.
if we're not doing things that instill it and institutionalize that, then we won't be a more compassionate and loving world. We will be the opposite.
Yeah. Thank you. What about you, Michael?
I think if what we collectively come back out of this with is awareness, then we are going to have a much better shot at changing the right things. I think that, there's a perfect example talking about how you can see the Himalayas, or saw a video yesterday of a jellyfish swimming in the Venice canals. And, like you couldn't see an inch down into those canals a few months ago. And so the awareness for how quickly this planet can repair itself if we just stop hurting it is a very visible reminder that I hope we can hang on to. And what probably will happen is, much like how they're talking about a second wave of the virus, if people come back to work too quickly, we might see a second wave of disrepair. We might see that people start to pollute again. And then people will rise up and they will say, no, we saw what it was like before this. Stop doing this. And we'll smack the hand a little bit and say, like, no, we can't go back to that, right? Because there's going to be bad actors, and there are going to be tendencies from organizations who just care about the bottom line to go back and start making money as quickly as possible. We're lying to ourselves if we don't think that some companies will do that. But it's incumbent upon all of us as individuals who have seen the difference and care enough to say something about it now, to stand up for stuff that maybe we let slide in the past.
Yeah. Thank you. Layla?
Yeah, I mean, in my work, we're in rapid response mode right now, where, we have to think about, one of the places that has very unexpectedly, but the reality is that one of the places where COVID-19 has hit the hardest in Latin America is in Ecuador. And Ecuador is one of the smallest Amazon countries, and yet it has incredible rates of COVID-19. And it's our concern is really that this virus spread, across the Amazon into indigenous communities, which are very vulnerable, to disease. Remember that, 500 years ago, half the native population was wiped out by genocide and disease. And that's the last thing that we want to happen again. So I say this just as a reminder, the reason why we are in rapid response mode right now to prevent COVID-19 from spreading across the Amazon is because we want to not repeat history. We want to, prevent that from happening again and protect and support, the caretakers, the guardians of the forests. I think, what they have been, the elders and the wisdom keepers of the Amazon, saying for decades, keep the blood of Mother Earth in the ground, keep oil in the ground. They've been saying, protect the medicines, protect the plants, protect the animals, protect the living forests. All of this has been said. And this is the time where we all are seeing it. We're all feeling it. And it's a time to say we can keep on that path. You know, we can just go back on that path and say, you know, but we're dependent on oil. Or we say, you know what, that path got us here and we have to go a different path. And it's not going to happen overnight. We know it's a transition, but we have to take this opportunity for this transformation to happen. And so again, I just want to encourage you all. There's so many wonderful, beautiful people sharing messages on Earth Day Live 2020 today, and check it out.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. I mean, one thing is for sure, this is a shared experience. This is a moment that everyone is feeling. No one is immune to it, or to more or lesser degrees, but this is something that is touching all of us in one way or another, and we're for sure in it together. But thank you so much, everyone, for your time, for the panelists, and for the questions. It was great to share these experiences with you. You know, please stay safe, stay well, and stay kind. I think that will take us a long way. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you on behalf of the Biennial. This has been an amazing conversation, and we really appreciate your time and connecting, and just reminding everyone that these are weekly conversations that we're having with different speakers around the Americas. So we will be back next week with another coffee chat on May 1st. So please tune in and join us. And thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.